Uh, Good morning. Let's see. Um, Good morning. Yeah, thank you very much for this to speak. It's real pleasure. I'm glad that we have the Zoom and the internet because I can speak here from here in California, uh, and I guess it might be a little cold up there. I didn't realize there was such an active community in Minnesota. So Reverend Dr. David Matsumoto found out he was from there. And you have other people. Found out that Reverend Henry Adams is also from your area. And of course, now Reverend Tatsu Chia. There must be something about being a dentist and becoming a minister. Could be in the old days, I understand that some of the warriors became monks after, in retirement. So as dentists, maybe we did so many root canals and kind of hurt people that we decided to become dentists to, assuage our duties before. I also, there's another person, I think Emi Nobuhiro is, and I understand she's from your area too. So the, the great thing that I've been fortunate to live is the fact that I grew up in a Jodo Shinshu family, an extended family, and a whole community. And being that I grew up in San Jose, which means that many young ministers are assigned here to learn. And so throughout the 50s, 60s, I met so many of the ministers and really absorbed it just through being around them. And then, of course, we had the community, and I'm old enough to have known some Issei and Nisei. And so I was very fortunate. And it's like being in Japan that Jodo Shinshu is the largest school in Japan. And just the culture, language, things in Japan just reflect Jodo Shinshu teachings. It's different in that we are influenced by a different type of religion, usually Christianity or Judaism. Also, we're in an economy that is slated differently than what we're used to. And also, what we're talking about from the time of Shinran and Renyo are centuries. And so there's a difference of time. And so it's been difficult for even our children who might be in their 40s, 50s, and 60s to really get the essence of Shin Buddhism when their surroundings are so influenced by other factors. And then, of course, and again, trying to understand this from the outside gets a little different because there are many things that are maybe not in opposition, but it's different than Jodo Shinshu. So I found that just by using familiar language, we've been able to communicate some of the essential truths of Jodo Shinshu. And I think it's really important at this time. And, we have all these factors affecting our society. We have global warming, this whole difference of communities, the wealth differences, differences of ideas, ideology. And so the world is troubled. And even in our Jodo Shinshu community, we are losing membership. Again, people are unsure of what the essence, because often we're interpreting Shin Buddhism from the standpoint of 13th century Japan, again, the difference of culture and time. And so hopefully we can present it from a contemporary standpoint that makes sense to people. That's what I've been doing. And the reason it's so important and the reason that it is effective is that we can look back at our parents, grandparents, maybe great-grandparents, again, with the Issei and Nisei pioneers, that they underwent very difficult conditions, coming in as immigrants, being discriminated against, not being able to get good jobs. And then after building up whatever they had in 1942, everyone lost what they had. And then to be imprisoned in camps far from their homes, losing businesses, farms. Just imagine if, our situation right now, if you were to lose your job and livelihood, home, whatever you had, and then go off for an unknown number of years, unknown places. And in on this, but whether your Twin Cities community, Japanese American community, was founded after or during World War II, because I think before then, there wasn't much migration to the east. What sustained the people at that time, I think, was spiritual support. And so what we have in Shin Buddhism is a way of thinking where we could really turn our thinking around. And this nembutsu, which is often difficult to communicate, is what sustains. So I've been trying to present an easy entry method of feeling the experience and emotions and thought of Nembutsu Amidabutsu. What it does, again, it's, again, Shinran says it's inconceivable and, difficult to communicate. And so what I wanted to present today were just some examples of perhaps how we might see it and perhaps how our pioneers have seen this. What Dr. Alfred Bloom has said is that when we say Nembutsu, Namo Amidabutsu, it has the ability to wake us up and to really appreciate life. And so I'll start with this question, and you may not have a Dharma school, but you may have learned this in Dharma school. What reasons are? I think, let's see. Now this is where the challenge comes in, and whether actively or not. I'm using the three poisons as hatred, ignorance, and greed. And if we listen to the words of Saichi, he says this: "Oh Saichi, where is the land of bliss?" And he says, "My land of bliss is right here." Where is the line of division between this world and the land of bliss? Because the eyes are the line of division. And so what he's saying here is it is just how we see the world that determines whether, we are in a world of suffering or in a world of bliss. And so often we are in this world of hatred, ignorance, and greed. And hatred we could think about as not liking someone else, others. There's a sense of competition, and that's so prevalent now. And it's in America and other parts of the world, this is coming out in terms of violence. And so we know the destructive nature of hatred, and that when things are done against us, we turn to hatred. And the other thing we have is ignorance. Ignorance is just not knowing something or knowing something and doing something stupid anyway. And we are, it's kind of hard to admit that we're ignorant. And yet, if we look at our progress through elementary school, high school, and beyond, working and as a young adult and as a more mature adult, we see that we have been ignorant at each point, that as we grow, if we put effort into it, we can diminish ignorance by some amount. And yet we have this sense that we are beyond ignorance, that we know it all at some point as adults. And yet what Shinran tells us is that reservoir of ignorance, and part of our ignorance is to deny that. And so this is part of what causes us to suffer. And then of course, greed. And greed is what runs our society. I think there was a movie in the 1990s. So greed is good. And our economy is based on wanting things that we don't have. So we buy the latest thing. So these are things that the Buddha tells us causes us suffering. And we kind of know this. And yet it's difficult to think of other things. And so just by saying the Nembutsu, we can try to change that. And if we, excuse me, think of hatred, if we think that the other person is the same as I am, change it to humility, that there are over 7 billion people, and each of us has an individual way of thinking and experiencing life. And so we realize that with 7 billion people, we can't all think alike. We have different backgrounds, education, where we live. And so there should be a sense of humility, of being one and equal with others. And this is what the Buddha talked about. So think about changing this hatred, and the reality is with one with humility. And then the second thing of ignorance. As I said, as we grow through life, we learn more. And as we learn more, we might tilt the scale to think we know everything. This is, the age of the teenager. They know everything. And yet, as we progress further and grow and mature, we realize that we didn't know that much as teenagers, and that there's more ignorance than understanding. So a mature outlook would be that there is a way beyond ignorance, and that is understanding, and understand that we are ignorant. And so we could try to shift that. And we shift that just by using the words Namo Amida Butsu, because as Dr. Bloom said, it is a way of change. And then we have greed. It's wanting things we don't have, and continually wanting more. If you have the latest car or Apple, you'll want to buy, the next year's product because it'll be better. And what I think Shin is based on is gratitude. And gratitude has a different way of seeing things. I will be doing a seminar in March, and we'll really emphasize this point, that the unique feature of Jodo Shinshu is that it's based on the thought that we have received. We have been in a constant state of receiving things. And we might understand this as children. At the time as children, we don't realize this, but looking back, we realize that we have been receiving things from others all the time. And so the point of our outlook on life as Shin Buddhists is to appreciate what we have been receiving, and not think so much as far as what we don't have. And so I'll be putting an emphasis on this one line of thinking that we appreciate what we have to balance the desire for things that we don't have. And so it's not that we're always, in this need, this thought of wanting more, but we balance that with this thought of appreciating what we have. And acknowledging that, we say Nembutsu. But if we say the Nembutsu without an experience of what that might mean, it may seem a little hollow. So I've been using the simple term thank you, our expression of gratitude, to be an opening step of understanding one of the essential meanings. And as we heard just earlier, that gratitude is our expression when we express Nembutsu, Namo Amida Butsu. So it's always done with a sense of appreciation. So the word thank you puts us in that frame right away. And eventually we can expand that thought. Today, the expanded thought of what this Nembutsu might mean. Now, again, going back to Higg, I don't know what Higg is unless it's the Higgs boson. And of course, that's getting a little abstract. But anyway, HUG, what is it's a hug? And so one way to look at Nembutsu is, going from hatred to humility, ignorance to understanding, and greed to gratitude. We have HUG. And I look at Nembutsu as a spiritual hug. Now, it may not cure everything. When we get hurt and need some love, well, a hug really helps. If we're sad and lonely, and there are times when we feel great and want to celebrate. So again, we like to hug each other. Sometimes, we went through a little meditation process. Sometimes when we feel anxious, to get a hug from someone really calms us down. And it helps us appreciate the past. And a hug is sometimes we do that just to feel great and just to feel that we're alive. And so although gratitude is an easy, what I have found is an easy way Nembutsu. There are other things that that express it, because again, it's an experience, and that it goes beyond something. So let me share a story with you, and perhaps you've had certain parts of this. And this story is about okay, a little boy named Corey and his grandfather, and John. And it may be similar to a story you may have had with your grandparent, if, if you had that. Now, Corey loved his grandfather, Ji-chan, do things together. And, they would take walks, and Ji-chan would be involved in many of his activities. And one day, Corey was running around. He was about 7 years old, and he had a cape, a superhero cape, and he was running around shouting, "Shazam, Shazam." And grandfather stopped him and said, "Oh, what are you doing, Corey? What does Shazam mean?" And Corey said, I don't know, but it's kind of magical. It makes me feel good. And Ji-chan said, "Well, that's good, but here's another word that you might say. And, when you're older, running around might seem a little silly, but saying these words may help you even when you're older, and that's namandavs." And namandavs, of course, is the shortened chant of Namo Amida Butsu. And so Corey asked, "Yeah, oh, well, what does that?" Ji-chan said, "Well, it's hard to explain, but there are many times when we use it and it makes us feel better, and it's magical." And so Ji-chan also told him that as Corey got older, have a deeper and broader meaning to him, because again, as we grow, if we put our effort into it, realize that our thoughts become broader and deeper. And so one day, Corey was running around and fell and skinned his knee and started to cry a bit. So Ji-chan came over and gave him a hug, and it felt better. And so Ji-chan said, "Well, let's look at that in the wound." And again, he gave him a hug, and he says, "How does that, does that make it heal faster?" And Corey said, "Yeah, thank you, Ji." And so this hug did feel better, although he had the skinned knee. And as Corey got older, his pet dog died, and Corey was really sad and cried a lot. And Ji-chan came over to console him and told him that everything changes and living things die, and that it's okay to feel sad and cry and feel this emotion. And Ji-chan gave Corey a big hug, and he said that in time, feelings will heal, but everything does die, and we have to accept things as they are, whether we think they're good or bad. But just saying namandavs helps. And again, it's like a hug. And it means that we are okay, even when we cry or are hurt, but we're accepted just as we are. And then in school, as Corey grew up, he was awarded the award at school because he was very active. During that assembly, afterwards, Ji-chan gave him a big hug and to say congratulations, because it really acknowledges that Corey had worked and, and so it could also mean, namandavs, hooray, you got this award. Now, in high school, Corey played basketball, and while he was practicing, Ji-chan would always say namandavs every time Corey made a basket at home as he was practicing. And so when his team won the championship, the team got together and gave it. And Corey just yelled out, "Namandavs." Naturally, it just came out because he was so happy. He was happy to be with his friends and to celebrate. And those words just expressed his happiness. And so as Corey grew up, he learned that namandavs at many occasions, that he could whisper it, yell it out, say it silently in his mind, whenever. And it meant a lot of different things. It meant I love you, congratulations, I feel for you, uh, we're with you. It's just had so many things that it meant to him. And most of all, it was an expression that had him realize I'm enjoying all aspects of life. Again, to explain, because it's a feeling and it's an experience. Now, one day, as Corey was a young adult, his parents told him to rush home because his grandfather was dying. And so Corey did go to his home, and his grandfather was in bed and he was breathing his last breath. And he could hear Jichan saying, Nama, just very quietly. And so Corey realized that this was, the last time he would be hearing his grandfather say that. And his last breath, he said, Namandao. And as he passed, energy that surrounded him coming from his. And Corey realized that all learned from his Jichan. The words Namandao was so important to life itself, and that it was about this energy of wisdom that was always surrounding them. And it was something that connected him to his grandfather. And especially now that his grandfather's physical presence was gone, but they were still connected spiritually. And so whenever he wanted to think of his grandfather, all he had to say was Namandao, Namandao. He realized that it was spiritual. It was like a spiritual hug. Did him that he could say it when hurt, lonely, with people. It's something that's special, and because of that, it's magical. It's difficult to explain, but it is something that we can pass on. And I think this is what is important for us to pass on, because as I said, pioneers who brought Shin Buddhism to America from Japan. And now that it's here, we experience it in a different condition. And here, which Shinran talked about. And Namandaos is important to have, not only in our spiritual life, but in our practical life, because it is what we practice in life that really helps us see whether life is one of suffering or whether it's settled. And we see that this life itself is one of bliss. And so I think it's important that we pass it on to our children and grandchildren, because again, we're facing conditions that are quite challenging. And so please think of this, that those in the past have passed this on to us. We see that it's effective. The spiritual life that we may think is not as present as our practical life is actually part of practical life. And that just by saying thank you, appreciating all the natural things that we have around us, realize we have received much more than what we might feature, that we can continue to appreciate things and then to pass that on. For it is the spirit of Namandao that surrounds us with wisdom, compassion, and so we enjoy our life with this deep spiritual thought. So please join me in expressing our deepest appreciation for the Nembutsu and life itself. Please join me in Gassho. Namo Amida Butsu, Namo Amida Butsu, Namo Amida Butsu, Namo Amida. Thank you.